Hello everybody, this is Dr. Ariala and adjusting here. In this video I will be focusing on the chapter on deviance. It sounds like such a formal or something word to me, but anyway. So deviance and social control. Deviance, interesting topic, as many are in this textbook. Sociologists look at deviance in many different ways, and so the authors of your textbook talk about some of those. Usually people think about deviance just in terms of crime, but it's a much broader concept. One of the things that your authors talk about is social functions and dysfunctions of deviance, and when you're thinking about social functions and dysfunctions, then what theory might you be thinking about from chapter 2? And there's a hint. It has the word function in it, that theory. So when I'm thinking about social functions and dysfunctions of deviance, I'm thinking about the functionalist or structural functionalist theory. And so the authors are sort of talking about that in that section, but they talk more or write more specifically about it later on in the chapter. But some people do think that there are purposes or functions for deviant behaviors, and others think that there are dysfunctions, that it's a completely dysfunctional behavior. So people look at it from different perspectives. And some of the interesting things that I think about when I'm reading through this chapter, one of them is the discussion on internal and external means of control, and how those two concepts can be used to think about why people may or may not commit deviant acts, and what may be the reasons that we don't. Is it due to internal controls, internal mechanisms of control, or due to external controls? And external controls would be sort of like norms that that concept was discussed in an earlier chapter. Sanctions are also interesting to me. Sanctions that are rewards or punishments, and so you have positive sanctions and negative sanctions, and these again are related to norms. So if you think about it, if you violate a norm in public and someone notices and they disapprove, then you will probably get what? A negative sanction. But if you do something that is not going against the norm, then you'll probably get a positive sanction from somebody who's paying attention. Some of the discussions that I think are interesting are deviant behaviors and social status. One thing that I think about are some researchers talk about how difficult it is for researchers to get access to higher social classes to do research on their patterns of behaviors, including deviance. And so there are a lot of people who think there's a lot more deviant behavior going on, among other things, in the upper classes than what we really know about, because they seem to have more barriers than do people in lower classes to getting access to what's going on. And then the authors talk about different perspectives or theories of helping us understand and analyze deviance, like the biological and the psychological and the sociological theories of deviance. The strain theories are interesting to examine. Do people commit deviant acts like abusing others because they feel some sort of strain or pressure? Do some people feel lost or ennui and that's why they might not behave properly or socially approved in a socially approved way. Merton's research has been instrumental in looking at deviant behaviors, and then of course the authors look at the three major perspectives, theories: conflict, structural functionalist, and symbolic interactionist, to look at how researchers utilize these different perspectives in explaining deviance. Labeling theory is really interesting to me. I've utilized labeling theory in some research and articles that I've written. And labeling theory was one of the reasons why I was kind of resistant to learning the DSM and to getting into diagnosing people in my clinical practice, because there are a lot of not so positive consequences or ramifications of labeling people. But because of the society that we live in, people tend to get labeled anyway for insurance purposes and things like that. But some of the research on labeling theory is that, especially with juveniles, there's a lot of research done with juveniles, like once you label somebody a punk or a geek or a nerd or a gang member or something like that, how do they then behave? Is the label really affecting them so that they may behave in more deviant ways? So is the label sort of influencing them in some way to behave in more deviant ways? Or because they behave in deviant ways, they get labeled, and so people look at, is sort of like the chicken and the egg. Does labeling someone negatively affect them? And some research has shown that that is true. Or does someone become labeled because of their behavior? And sometimes we label people without really knowing what's going on behind that behavior, and so they are improperly or incorrectly labeled. And then the authors talk about different kinds of crime and how crime is measured. One of the important crime surveys that they discuss is the National Crime Victimization Survey. This is a really widely utilized survey about crime that researchers use a lot, and so it would definitely be to your benefit to learn a little bit about it. And then of course they talk about the criminal justice system and some aspects of that, and there are certainly courses that focus specifically on the criminal justice system, as well as separating juvenile justice from adult justice. And there are a lot of critiques about the so-called justice system. Some people think it's really should be called the injustice system, and some of the many issues that are involved in the problems that are facing the criminal justice system and people that are part of it. It's a big, big business, for one thing, and so a lot of people are concerned about that. The crime clock on page 201 is certainly an eye-opener. It's hard to comprehend how much crime goes on every single day. Yeah, so again, this chapter can help us start to get a little bit of an understanding of what deviance is and how some researchers study it, and some different concepts that are related to this thing that we call deviant behavior. And then one of the perspectives that they mention is the relativistic idea of deviance. Not every behavior that you or I or a group of people would consider deviant in one place would be considered deviant in another. In the United States, walking down the street, talking to yourself in some areas of the country would be considered deviant, whereas in other places it would not. So, you know, if you think about it as an example, if you're walking down a hall of a psychiatric institution, talking to yourself, you know, that's not really considered a deviant behavior in that context. But, you know, if you're walking down your friendly neighborhood street doing that, then people would probably think that there was something wrong with you or you're acting in a deviant kind of way. So that's what they mean by, or one aspect that they mean by deviance and relativistic, the relativistic aspect of it. And deviant behaviors change over time too. What was considered deviant behavior, you know, 1 or 2 decades ago may or may not be these days. Okay, that's my little spiel on and thoughts on deviance. See you in cyber world.